In Kansas City, Missouri, we met an American who ran for Luxembourg at the 1952 Olympic Games in Helsinki. His name is Bob Schaefer. He was born in Esch-Alzette and a director of an art print shop. On a map drawn by Bob, we look up the most important Luxembourg settlements in the Midwest. Chicago, Aurora, Port Washington, Luxembourg, Wisconsin, Dubuque, Iowa, Luxembourg, Iowa, Rolling Stone, St. Paul, Luxembourg, Minnesota, St. Cloud and Remsen in western Iowa. Chicago is naturally our first destination. Luxembourgish business names are all over the place, but the real home of our fellow countrymen is the brick building of the Luxembourg Gardens, where Leo Echette is serving behind the bar, and Consul Joseph Vitry is chairing a reunion of Luxembourgers. We recognize Chris Schleich, Harry Trausch, Charlie Fouch, Judy Echette, Fred Pesce and Nick Colling, the manager of the house, who tells us about the different events at the Luxembourg Gardens.
Hi, am Luxembourg Garden, Savia mir al jaar, am Wanter puurmal huizen civi, Treipen, hoe mir immer, durch de ganze Wanter, Luxembourger Sosis, gekachte Käse, en noch gute Luxembourger Wein. Dat eerst fest wat mir al jaar feiern, als jo wie high auch Silvesterovend, mit einem großen Silvesterball, wo viel Luxembourger Leute zusammenkommen, als sich gut amüsieren. Dann am Wanter, wenn die verschiedenen Vereine hier Kartpartien und Dance, die sie am Garten auffallen. Der letzte Freitag am Mond wird der Luxembourg American Social Club immer hier Versammlung, wo gewöhnlich so 100 Leute da sind. Nur der Versammlung, wo sie immer Unterhaltung und dann gewöhnlich gut alle Lützeburger Lieder gesungen. Am Sommer haben wir die verschiedenen Lützeburger den nächsten Nummer aus dem Luxembourg American Social Club am Juli und dann durch noch kein Schürbe vor, die immer Sunday and Monday of Labor Day auffallen geht.
Bowling, as popular with Luxembourg as the card game 66, is like a small industry for the owner, with 20 bowling alleys in a row and as many automatic machines replacing the pins. At the Colling home, the roles are inverted, which is not unusual in America. Nick is doing the cooking, whereas Marie is serving the cocktails. At the table, we recognize former Vice Consul Gilson and his wife Margaret Creer, Margaret and Harry Trausch, and Charlie Fouch. Luxembourg wine is a rarity in Chicago, and a bottle is only opened on special occasions. Like most Luxembourg immigrants from outside Chicago, Fred Pesce from Folchette started as a flower grower. The land which his market garden occupies in the Chicago suburbs is worth millions of dollars today. On one part of his property, Fred has built a large supermarket. The business's speciality is still flowers, which are grown in 2.5 acres of greenhouses. That part of the business is run by Fred Péché's eldest son, whereas 4 other of his 11 children, who have between them 36 children, are in charge of the different departments of the supermarket. The butcher shop produces traditional Luxembourg sausages, which find many Luxembourg customers. Here is Chris Schleich from Boulade with his wife, a native of Echternach. These are probably the last pictures of a Luxembourg landmark in Chicago, the Aiglon restaurant, which was owned by Teddy Majerus of Notum. It was a first-class restaurant known very well by every taxi driver from Chicago. However, last year Teddy turned 72, and with deep regret, he sold the Aiglon. In Aurora, too, Luxembourgers have their own meeting place where they play poker and watch TV. Even though all of these faces look like typical Luxembourgers, Luxembourgish traditions in Aurora are no longer that strong, and the language is less spoken than in Chicago. Each year for Memorial Day, the officer of the Luxembourg Brotherhood, here represented by Leo Echette and Harry Trausch, lay down a wreath decorated with a red, white and blue ribbon on the tomb of those Luxembourgers who died abroad without next of kin. Another monument honors one of the best-known Luxembourgers in America, Nicholas Gonner from Luxembourg-Pfaffel. In 1889, he wrote a book on early immigration to the United States, and he was the editor of the Luxembourg Gazette from Dubuque. Harry Trausch from Borscheid is the editor of the Luxembourg News, the only Luxembourg paper published in the States. Harry still has many contacts to the homeland, especially through the Luxembourg press. His small bi-monthly publication has a circulation of 2,000. Harry Trausch comments on his Luxembourg News.
Die Luxemburger Zeitung, die in Chicago gedruckt wird, die Zeitung war gegründet so kurz nach 1900. Und an dem Komitee, die Zeitung damals so rausgebracht hat, da waren die gewissen Herren von dem Luxemburger von Amerika, so wie Mr. Watry, Mr. Jean-Pierre Knaaf, Mr. Matthias Sus, Mr. Michael Welter und Mr. Nicholas Nilles. Nou, Nicholas Nilles späterhin, der war der Redakteur von der Luxemburger Zeitung bis zu 1949. Nou, ist mal so 45. Und dann ist dann Herr Victor Jacobi, der war dann der Editor davon. Das nicht leicht für so eine Zeitung für Luxemburger, es war in Amerika.
During 1962, Minister Paul Elvinger led important negotiations with DuPont de Nemours in order to get their new plant to conturn Luxembourg. He came specifically to Chicago to launch the mission. As president of the Luxembourg Fishermen Federation, he insisted on landing a couple of trout in a Luxembourgers fishing paradise. In the heart of Chicago, John Redding bought a few sandpits. By filling them with spring water, he created a small lake and a few ponds. Anyone can go fishing there and enjoy the outdoors in the middle of the city. Port Washington, Wisconsin, is an industry and harbor city on Lake Michigan with 5,000 inhabitants, of which almost 4,000 have Luxembourg parents or grandparents. The mayor is called Siggy, and to honor our visit, he proclaimed the day Luxembourg Day. One of the highlights being a tripen banquet. North of Port Washington, Luxembourg immigrants of 100 years ago built their houses in a traditional Luxembourgish style. They strongly from the American wood frame houses and are a real curiosity. This is the parochial school of the Laker Church. The Luxembourg language maintained itself for 3 generations in Wisconsin, even though almost no descendants of our immigrants ever returned to Luxembourg before 1963. The new generations, however, no longer learn Luxembourgish in their Catholic private schools. Indeed, they must be shown on a map where their great-great-grandparents came from. Although private schools get no public funding in America, they are better equipped than most of the Luxembourg schools. The schoolyard has no tarmac at them, but it has a lot of playground equipment. The village of Belgium in Wisconsin has 600 inhabitants, of which 90% are of Luxembourg stock. At the bank, which is a drive-in bank, we are welcomed by the Wisconsin Luxembourgers and shoemaker Croat, who shows off his impressive genealogical tree.
Mijn oergroospap zijn als de Wiever voortgewanderd am jaar 1847. Maar daar kan er. Mijn groospap, die was 13 jaar oud wie ze komen zijn. Mijn pap was geboren in Belgium, Wisconsin, en daar zijn ik ook geboren. Hij gezegd, hij schwätzen ze naar al Lutzenburg.
Not only did the shoe factory in Belgium process leather from Luxembourg's vilts for a long time, but their workforce too is overwhelmingly of Luxembourg descent, and they still speak the Luxembourg language. After work, local Luxembourgers go to the saloon to enjoy a bottle of beer, just like in the home country. There we meet Frank Klein, originally from Weideggerhof in Luxembourg, and the saloon keeper Curly Pfeiffer. A lot of stuffed animals from the local forests are displayed on the wall. Around Belgium and Port Washington, we meet a few Luxembourgish owners of medium-sized factories. Back in 1845, Ditchen Fonderies, for example, transplanted their family and foundry industry from Kolmerberg, Luxembourg, to Wisconsin. John Gilson from Kolmerberg still manages the plant. His 3 factories produce garden tractors, concrete mixers, and cast-iron furniture. The workmen we see here in the factory at Fredonia are almost all of Luxembourg descent. A castle in America is pretty rare, but when Teddy Bettendorf was very homesick for his birthplace Vianden, he built a copy of the Vianden Castle with his own hands, based on an old picture. He lives a quiet bachelor's life, skipping through newspaper clippings that rave about his castle. The only genuine elements of the castle at Fox River Grove are a couple of stones from Vianden, which Leo Eschet brought back for Teddy after a visit to the home country. In Dubuque, Iowa, Arthur Trausch from Hollerish owns an industrial bakery, the workings of which he explains.
Met onze bakkerij uit Dubuque. We bakken meer, gewöhnlich al daar, 35.000 pond brood en ongeveer zo'n 500.000 kisseltje aan donuts. Fridays get dat vlees 2 maal zoveel. Bij ons het meel automatisch gewichen, wasser ook, en al die andere zaken die moesten gebruiken voor brood te maken, zijn aan de knetmachine, en dan wordt een deeg gemaakt, en dan na 20 minuten dan gaat dan een machine, waar het afgewissen wordt, en een pannen gemaakt, en dan gaat het aan de gaarschrank, dan blijft het zo 45 minuten. En dan gaat het dan nurken, wordt goed gebakken.
Since 1845, Dubuque has been at the heart of the Luxembourg immigrant community. Every year, loads of buses drive Chicago Luxembourgers to the heart of Christ Church in Dubuque, where the octave procession takes in unison with the one in Luxembourg.
Among women and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
The fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Not far from Dubuque, St. Donatus is the most typical Luxembourg village of America. Almost all of the farmhouses are built of stone, and in truly traditional Luxembourgish style, they stand in a compact row. People who speak Luxembourgish, like the old blacksmith Hoffman in St. Donatus, are becoming rarer. The village has almost died out, and the churchyard is the most beautiful item left to be seen. Most tombstones have inscriptions in German and indicate the Luxembourg villages where the immigrants were born. Next to the church stands the first Catholic boarding school for girls west of the Mississippi. Just like the Bilchen Chapel, it was built by Father who was born around 1830 in Kurisch, Luxembourg. In the same area, a locality of Luxembourg, Iowa, is called Fleiberg, which translates to Flea Hill. Along the way, we noticed that in American towns, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, which equates to around 40 kilometers per hour. At the post office, we're told that for many years, no letters were exchanged between Luxembourg, Europe, and Luxembourg, Iowa. This friendly old lady with a headdress known as was born in Iowa to Luxembourg parents. She has never actually visited Luxembourg. However, her clothing style is very reminiscent of a genuine Luxembourg farmer's wife. Like most elderly people, Ted Hubert, a retired farmer from South Dakota, lives on his pension. His niece, Marianne Hubert from Bel Air, Luxembourg, is visiting him whilst she studies in the USA. Charlotte Weber from Luxembourg shows us the view of Winona and the Mississippi River. We are now in Minnesota, the fourth state with a strong Luxembourgish population, and where again there is a place called Luxembourg. In the parish church of Rolling Stone, which has a closer resemblance to Luxembourg churches than to the American ones, we come across a wedding celebration of a Luxembourg couple, Pauline Speltz and Raymond Meisinger. At such a wedding, the entire village is invited. In Chicago at the Luxembourg Gardens, we witnessed a wedding with around 400 guests. The village of Rolling Stone was founded some 110 years ago by Luxembourgers from the Heffingen and Younglinster area. Luella Goerdinger shows us the tombstone of her grandfather, Peter Stoos, from Heffingen. Peter is credited locally as being the founder of Rolling Stone. Untouched by American modernism, Rolling Stone lies in a area of the Mississippi, and its inhabitants have mostly rural professions, like Mr. Speltz, a tractor mechanic. Another Speltz owns a poultry farm. In the Midwest, farmers are the backbone of the economy. Greg Fider's grandfather arrived in 1845 as a goat farmer from Mootfoot. Today, his descendants in Wisconsin own a large dairy farm with 60 Holstein cows and an impressive machinery fleet. Specialized dairy farmers own very little land, typically between 150 and 250 acres, with almost no grazing land. Cattle do not go out on the pastures like in Luxembourg. They are fed in stables with corn and silage. Milk production is fully automated under strict hygiene rules. It was almost impossible to convince the farmer to open of the cooling tank for a short film sequence. Even on their own farm, they drink pasteurized milk. In America, corn is the main forage. In Remsen, western Iowa, farms specialize in fattening cattle for slaughter. Ray Alish's father emigrated in the 1880s from Frizange. Now his son is raising 400 pigs and 100 young Herefords who will never get to see the pastures. After having been bought as calves from western ranchers, they stand for months in a corral. They get fattened from 600 to 1,600 pounds and then are sold to the big slaughterhouses. His first-class meat earns Ray 2.5 million francs yearly, and he runs his farm all by himself. Not far away from the Minnesota state capitol in St. Paul, we come across Luxembourg antiquarians Mr. and Mrs. Ben Mertens from Wasserbillig. They collect steins from Mettlach. In America, many things are viewed as antiques, which we in Luxembourg consider only as old-fashioned. At the home of librarian Mr. Dunn, we had a nice surprise. Mr. Dunn, whose wife was born in Esch-sur-Alzette, is a collector of Luxembourg books and paintings. And there we saw, hanging face-to-face with a genuine Feininger, a painting by Luc Thijssen. His friend Vic Leica also collects paintings of Luxembourg's old town, even though he is not of Luxembourg origin. As a soldier during World War II, he'd been stationed for a few months in the Klaushof near Schoenfels, and since that time, he's taken Luxembourg to his heart. On our way west, we examine a log house, pioneering days, and then we arrive in lumber country, the northwest, bordering with Canada. An awful lot of valuable wood is still burnt up in a kind of iron furnace, but that is an improvement over former times, when the giant trees got burnt completely on the spot, because the workers could not handle them with their primitive tools. On rough roads, we drive deep into the mountains, looking for the lumber camp of a person of Luxembourg origin. These roads have to be driven into the virgin forest to get started. At the front line of the camps, lumberjacks have a dangerous job, but they earn 2,000 francs a day. Steel cables run over a high mast down to the wood-cutting grounds, and a heavyweight diesel engine hauls tree trunks up the hill. By a signal horn sounding over the hills, the operator communicates with the cable crew down at the cutting grounds. The clouds permanently hang low over the forests, where it rains almost non-stop. It's the rain, however, that sustains the growth of these forests. Controlled and is limited to tracts of around 40 acres. Whilst lumber earns huge profits, it certainly does nothing positive to the beauty of this landscape. Material. Here, even the wood shavings are transformed into money. "2,500 kilometers to the south, we're guessed with Consul Pits in Los Angeles. Here too, vegetation grows like in a greenhouse. Geraniums grow up to a man's height, and Mrs. Pitts can pick lemons and avocados in her garden. Family strolling through Disneyland. Mrs. Ellis, formerly Miss Marcel Bockeler, comes from Luxembourg. They're having a ride on a Mississippi boat through the park. The upper part of the ship is genuine, but the Mississippi is not. Below the waterline, the ship runs on rails. Mr. Ellis finds celebrating the odd Luxembourger. In Long Beach, California, we meet Dr. Roger Schock from Gravenmacher at work in the psychiatric department of the city's health department. In Long Beach, many a Miss Luxembourg has provided the odd Luxembourger. In Long Beach, California, we meet Dr. Roger Schock from Gravenmacher at work in the psychiatric department of the city's health department. Many a Miss Luxembourg has